Okay, this is a book review. Here's the book, How the Laser Happened by Charles Townes, Nobel Prize winner for inventing the laser and the maser. He won it in 1964. I'll show you his picture right here. This is him over here. The guy was an American, born in 1915. He lived to 2015, so he lived 100 years. And I've studied tons of genius. This guy's sort of, the stereotype of a genius. And it's good to read about him because you'll see the patterns of these guys. Okay, he was born on a small family farm in South Carolina. His father was, interested in books, had a nice library in the home. His father also liked nature. It was an amateur naturalist. And that's a very characteristic thing. For example, if you study James Watson, who won the Nobel Prize for the co-discovery of the structure of DNA with, Watson and Crick. His father was a bird watcher, and they go around watching birds. How do you think I got started in nature? My friend was a bird watcher, and then he knew a naturalist professor, and we would go bird watching. Okay, that's how I got, I sort of fell in love with biology and nature, and then it creates a personality individual in the person where you believe that nature is important. I was, on the wrestling team, varsity starter, studying in really difficult classes. I went to Palo Alto Baylands out by the Stanford area. I'm wearing my Stanford tie today. And I asked the lady at the Nature Center, Miss, could I please see your field guide, to the birds and the plants of the area? And she's like, oh, we don't have one. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have a field guide? What the hell's wrong with you? So I found that so outrageous that they didn't have a field guide, despite having no free time. I went and I mapped out all the birds and the plants in the Palo Alto Baylands and wrote a field guide for them, just on my own, and gave it to them for free because I felt that had to be done. Anybody who visits is going to want that. So what I'm trying to tell you is that's the kind of personality that leads to achievement in the sciences. It comes from within. It's not because mom and dad say you have to study. It's because within the person they're willing to study because they want to. They had a family farm, and so he learned, how to fix the tractors and the other things around there, then started getting interested in radios and the other things a young man gets interested in those environments, growing food, fixing stuff. They were very devout Christians. He's reading the Bible all the time, learned Latin in school. Father was a big reader. His brother was more interested in biology than he was. His brother ended up becoming an entomologist. It means a PhD in studying insects. He's a collector of butterflies and wasps. He's an expert in some species of wasp, as his brother, okay? The mother was also quite educated, too, and loved reading and taking courses, ongoing continuing education. So they were an intelligent family, all right? And notice, they're poor, but there's no crime. All this stuff about being poor is an excuse for crime. That's not true. My mother's family was dirt poor. Both my parents were dirt poor. Both of my parents, my mother and my father, grew up on a dirt floor. My father in Ireland, my mom in Puerto Rico. Okay, my mom has a master's degree. My mom has a master's degree. A bunch of her brothers and sisters are physicians and MDs and PhDs. They were dirt poor. What I'm trying to say is in America, people try to say, oh, if you're poor, that's an excuse to be a criminal and a lowlife. No, it's not. Okay? My parents were both dirt poor. They both got very educated. Their whole families did. Okay, if people are intelligent and hardworking and, mind their own business, you can do very well despite being poor. It's harder nowadays, especially if you're the wrong ethnic group. A white guy like this, they probably wouldn't have allowed him into these universities nowadays. They go, get out of here. He went to the best places, Caltech. He had to get scholarship money. He was so poor. Bell Labs. He started out just going to local college at Furman, which was the local college for him. And then Bell Labs was real famous for producing geniuses and genius achievement. Because what do? You basically get a bunch of smart men and you let them work their asses off on whatever they're interested in. They got to have some direction, but you give them freedom to pursue questions in an open way, and they'll make a lot of basic science discoveries. There's none of this BS in the modern world. Okay, you don't need a bunch of women. You don't need, a bunch of transsexuals. You don't need people with purple hair and human resources, telling you to be more thoughtful and sensitive. You need a bunch of workaholics that love what they're doing and they're willing to work 80 hours a week. They don't give a shit. They're getting paid, a crappy salary, but they're doing it because they love it. That's where great achievements come from. Okay, these guys are working over 80 hours a week. They're a bunch of maniacs. They love it. He was involved in, helping the USA, developing radar during World War II, all kinds of stuff. And most of these guys, before 1900, almost all the scientists were a bunch of white Christian men. After 1900, then you get tons of these Jewish guys with their real high IQs, and they're creating these great, magnificent achievements. Okay, that's where most scientific achievement comes from. It didn't come from people all over the world. It just didn't. After 1950, 1960, 70, especially after 1970, you're seeing more other ethnic groups in there. You're seeing some women come in there. And there are some women who do fantastic achievements. But what I'm trying to say is this is basically where most of the groundwork, foundational science comes from in the history of the world, okay? That's just a fact. Go read about it yourself. I study this stuff a ton. This is well known. There's nothing, and I actually think it's good. That's actually, I think, one of the best parts of the book is you see his childhood. He's always trying to learn things. His father's directing him in the direction. And you see that. Read about the biographies like Richard Feynman, the great physicist. His father was teaching him, asking him questions and stuff. My father was a great influence on me. He'd take me to the bookstore. I always see the old man reading and studying and working. I'm like, that's what a man does. A young boy gets it in his mind's eye. What his father does, that's probably what he's going to end up doing. So it's very good for a child to see the parents reading and thinking. My father said his father was more of an athlete, not a scholar, but my dad's mother, my grandmother, was always reading, and that, went off on my father and motivated him, to be valedictorian of his high school. Okay, what else? Because there's this attitude nowadays that, everybody's equal in academic achievement. That is not true. The people who are the best at academics are people who love it, and they're workaholics because they love it, okay? I saw the same thing when I was at Stanford. I had some friends. We were part of the advanced chemistry group because I initially was going to major in chemistry. I later just decided to major in biology because advanced organic synthetic lab, where I met some really smart people. They all just loved chemistry and biology, and we sit here and have all these extended conversations about all these topics in science. We just liked it, okay? That was an elective class. We didn't need it for our majors. But what I'm trying to say is that's where a lot of the big stuff comes from. You start meeting experts in another area, they've got something synergistic with what you know. That's where it comes from. It doesn't come from forcing all these people and trying to have a quota system of all these different people in there. No, you don't get good at this stuff unless you love it, because you have to be a workaholic. An average effort, 40 hours a week, you're just not going to be competitive with a genius who's working 80 hours a week or more than 80 hours a week, Elon Musk had said it too. Elon Musk said, look, if you and another person are equal intelligence, equal ability, and you're working 100 hours a week and they're only working 40 or 60 hours, or let's say you're working 100 hours a week, they're working 50 hours a week, you will get there twice as fast as them. Because a lot of times that's kind of what it is, a competition to get there, to the next discovery, the next achievement. So you have to have workaholic maniacs. It's just a fact, okay? Don't get me wrong, you can get through med school, be a professional, that's fine, and you can be competent, that's great. But I'm not talking about being competent and getting by. I'm talking about doing genius level work. And you have to be a bit of a maniac. It's just a fact. If you start reading about geniuses, you will see that is typical. Look at Johann Sebastian Bach, 22 children or something, writing a big musical composition every week. He was a maniac. Same thing with Mozart, same thing with Beethoven. That's just how they are. Okay, let's see what else. And of course, he's a devout Christian. Okay, most of these guys are totally devout religious guys. The smarter you are, and the more you understand how incredible and complicated and magnificent all this advanced physics and biology is, the more likely you are to be devout and religious. All right? He says, science and religion are quite parallel, much more similar than most people think, and in the long run, they converge. Science tries to understand what our universe is like and how it works. Religion is aimed at understanding the purpose and the meaning of our question, including our lives. If the universe has a purpose or meaning, then this must be reflected in its structure and function. Therefore, in science, okay? He prayed every day. He said the beauty of nature is obviously made by God, and God created the universe so humans could emerge and thrive. He also, he loved being a physicist. Okay, he could have done other things. A guy as smart as him, his genius IQ, he could have been good at anything he wanted to be. He said, I have rarely done any work in my life. I have had a good time. I am exploring. I'm playing a game, solving puzzles, having fun. And for some reason, people have been willing to pay me for it. Officially, I was supposed to retire years ago. But for what? He was still working when he was 99 years of age. He loved it. Why stop having a good time? It was fun for him to do physics, okay? So for a guy like this, calculus is a walk in the park, and it's fun for him to do calculus, okay? He was doing all this complex physics, okay? I got A+ in calculus, okay, when I was a student. And things in this book, when he started getting into the scientific stuff, it got kind of complex, and I'm not really that interested in advanced physics, okay? And the book wasn't primarily about physics. It was about his life, but then it started getting into a lot of the physics. It's still worth reading. I would still say it's even worth having a young person read this. They won't be able to understand all the physics, but they'll understand the logistics of what it was like for him growing up. They'll understand how he got interested in physics. They'll understand his choices and dilemmas as he went through college and grad school. So I think it's highly worth reading for a young person. I also think the reason why they try to force women into all these STEM topics and into these science classes is because they don't want them to have children. The more a woman keeps going towards graduate degrees, residencies, fellowships, and all these things, the less likely she'll have any babies. It's a fact, okay? I know lots of doctors, real pretty, real nice, no children, no husband. It's like they career, then they forgot. Okay, I dated a girl, really pretty Harvard doctor, and she's like, well, I'm going to have one kid, maybe two, but I want to wait till after I finish my fellowship. Then I got to wait till after I make partner in my medical group. And I ended up, talking to her. She couldn't get pregnant, and then she finally had a baby through in vitro fertilization when she was about 45, okay? Meanwhile, the girl who, just got a 4-year degree, she's got, 4 kids or something. So anyways, that's one thing women have to be careful about. Having a baby, that's probably going to bring them more happiness than anything else in their life. Their career, maybe. But, your career doesn't really care about you. It just wants you to make money for the corporation you work for. Anyways, let's see what else does he have to say. He says, many great scientific ideas just occur with a flash of insight, like a divine revelation, okay, rather than from thinking. Religion is more important than science because it addresses the most important long-range questions like what is the meaning and purpose of life? Yeah, society would benefit a lot more from teaching the Bible in grade school and high school to kids than it would from teaching them science. Because they'll remember the Bible. They forget almost everything the way science is taught in grade school and high school, and even from college science, okay? It would help them. So anyways, this is an example of a great man, a great genius, and he's kind of a prototypic genius. Really smart, really religious, loves complex science, workaholic, and just devotes himself to it. He was constantly doing experiment after experiment after experiment, trying to understand, resonance spectroscopy, trying to understand all this complex stuff about optics, and that's what led him to convergence, to, working with the masers and the lasers. So anyways, I think it's a very good book, and I think it's a good book for any young, smart person to read to kind of see the life of the mind and how it plays out a career as being a scientist.